Kuhn Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @KuhnReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@kuhnreview.com. That is INFORMATION@CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the National, Friday the 25th of July 2025. From the Politics section. Corbyn's Sultana Party sees 200,000 sign-ups in 24 hours. Article written by Steph Braun. A new left-wing party being formed by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana has already collected 200,000 sign-ups in less than 24 hours. Earlier this month, MPs Sultana and Corbyn confirmed the launch of a new party, which would build a real alternative to the Labour Party. Corbyn shared the temporary name of the new party to be Your Party on Thursday, telling followers, "It's time for a new kind of political party," just before Sultana confirmed that was not its official name. A consultation has been launched around the party's future, which will be decided at an upcoming People's Assembly. Corbyn confirmed on Twitter X on Friday that 200,000 people had signed up for updates about the new party. He posted, "Wow, in under 24 hours, 200,000 people have signed up to build a real alternative to poverty, inequality and war. Something special is happening. Be part of it at https://yourparty.uk. Corbyn is encouraging the public to sign up to be part of the founding process, which is set to lead to an inaugural conference. A staggering poll earlier this month suggested the new party would be level with Labour when it comes to voting intention. The survey conducted by pollsters Find Out Now for LBC News found that of the 650 people polled, 15% would support the new party, matching Labour's support at 15%. Those aged 18 to 29 were particular backers, with 33% saying they would back a new left-wing party, ahead of Reform UK 24% and Labour 18%. Sultana announced she had quit the Labour Party earlier this month, claiming she would be setting up a new organisation with Corbyn. Organised by the Peace and Justice Project, a non-profit organisation founded by Corbyn, the consultation seeks to shape the policy of the new party. The responses from the consultation will be considered alongside contributions from campaign groups, community campaigners, trade unionists and independent councillors. The consultation is intended for supporters of the Peace and Justice Project and closes at 5 p.m. on July 31st. Your Party plans to have the party in place in time for next year's Holyrood elections. That article was written by Steph Braun. From the National, Friday the 25th of July 2025, from the Politics section. Ex-MP Mhairi Black leaves SNP as she slates party direction. Article written by Steph Braun. Mhairi Black has quit the SNP after becoming unhappy with the direction of the party. Speaking ahead of her upcoming Edinburgh Fringe show, she told the Herald that, for a long time, she had not agreed with several decisions that had been made. She said, "There have just been too many times when I've thought, I don't agree with what you've done there, or the decision or strategy that has been arrived at. To be honest, I'm looking around thinking, there are better organisations that I could be giving a membership to than this one that I don't feel has been making the right decisions for quite some time." Black singled out what she described as the capitulation on LGBT rights, trans rights in particular, as an issue for her, adding that the party could be doing better on Palestine. Looking ahead, she said she would seek to support organisations such as the Good Law Project, which has directly campaigned on issues such as climate crisis and trans rights by mounting legal challenges. That's what I want to throw my money behind, Black added. Black was elected for the party back in 2015 after beating Douglas Alexander in Paisley and Renfrewshire South. She was just 20 when she entered the Commons, but quickly made a name for herself as an impactful speaker. Her maiden speech was watched 10 million times online, but towards the end of her time in Parliament, she spoke about reaching breaking point with Westminster. After successfully defending her seat in the 2017 and 2019 elections, Black announced that she would not be seeking re-election in 2023. Last August, she performed a fringe show entitled "Politics is Not for Me," in which she explained why she believed Westminster was a dysfunctional institution and not fit for purpose. During the show, she also revealed she had been diagnosed with ADHD in 2018. She is returning to the Fringe next month with a new show called Work in Progress, which will not focus solely on politics. Black said she remains committed to the independence cause. "I'm still just as pro-independence, absolutely," Black said. "If anything, I'm probably a bit more left-wing than I have been. I don't think I've changed all that much. I feel like the party needs to change a lot more." An SNP spokesperson said, "The SNP is the largest political party in Scotland, united under John Swinney's vision of creating a better, fairer Scotland for everyone. After a year of disappointment and letdowns from the UK Labour government, it's clear that real change will never come from Westminster and that independence is essential for a better future." That article was written by Steph Braun and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 25th of July 2025, from the Politics section. France to recognise Palestine as UK to hold emergency talks. Article written by Lucy Jackson. France is officially set to recognise the state of Palestine as pressure mounts on Keir Starmer to do the same. The Prime Minister is set to hold emergency talks with France, Germany and Italy on Friday over Israel's starvation of Palestinians in Gaza. The announcement came just hours before French President Emmanuel Macron said France would officially recognise Palestine as a state in September, following months of speculation. In a statement on Twitter, X, Macron said, "Consistent with its historic commitment to a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, I have decided that France will recognise the state of Palestine. I will make this solemn announcement before the United Nations General Assembly this coming September. The urgent priority today is to end the war in Gaza and to bring relief to the civilian population. Peace is possible." Macron called for an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and massive humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza, as well as the demilitarization of Hamas and a move to secure and rebuild Gaza. The French president added, "And finally, we must build the state of Palestine, guarantee its viability, and ensure that by accepting its demilitarization and fully recognizing Israel, it contributes to the security of all in the region. There is no alternative." Starmer has faced mounting pressure to immediately recognize Palestine as a state, including from his own cabinet. In his statement on Thursday evening, the Prime Minister did not appear to suggest such a move would be imminent. While he recognized that statehood is the inalienable right of the Palestinian people, Starmer said that it was a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas which would put us on the path to the recognition of a Palestinian state. He said, "The suffering and starvation unfolding in Gaza is unspeakable and indefensible. While the situation has been grave for some time, it has reached new depths and continues to worsen. We are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe. I will hold an emergency call with E3 partners tomorrow where we will discuss what we can do urgently to stop the killing and get people the food they desperately need, while pulling together all the steps necessary to build a lasting peace. We all agree on the pressing need for Israel to change course and allow the aid that is desperately needed to enter Gaza without delay." The Prime Minister continued, It is hard to see a hopeful future in such dark times, but I must reiterate my call for all sides to engage in good faith and at pace to bring about an immediate ceasefire and for Hamas to unconditionally release all hostages. We strongly support the efforts of the US, Qatar and Egypt to secure this. We are clear that statehood is the inalienable right of the Palestinian people. A ceasefire will put us on a path to the recognition of a Palestinian state and a two-state solution which guarantees peace and security for Palestinians and Israelis. That article was written by Lucy Jackson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 25th of July, 2025, from the news section. Israeli woman arrested over plot to kill Benjamin Netanyahu. Article written by Lucy Jackson. An Israeli woman has been arrested over an alleged plot to assassinate Benjamin Netanyahu, according to reports. Israeli state broadcaster KAN claimed that the woman, identified as an anti-government activist in her 70s, was plotting to kill the Israeli Prime Minister. Reports of the assassination attempt appear in other Israeli and international media outlets, including Reuters, which said the woman had sought assistance from other activists to obtain weapons and gather information about Netanyahu's security arrangements. According to the news agency, Israel's National Unit for Serious and International Crime Investigations and the Shin Bet Internal Security Agency have passed on their evidence to the State Attorney's Office, pending possible charges. Israeli newspaper Haaretz, claiming sources familiar with the case, said the woman had recently fallen ill and told people she planned to take Netanyahu with her. Several people who heard the woman's remarks reportedly contacted police, prompting the opening of the investigation. She was arrested around 6 weeks ago, according to Reuters, and has since been released to house arrest. Haaretz said the woman, who comes from Tel Aviv and was not identified, was suspected of wanting to target Netanyahu with an explosive device or rocket-propelled grenade. The news comes as French President Emmanuel Macron announced that France will officially recognize Palestine as a state. In a statement on Thursday evening, Macron said, "Consistent with its historic commitment to a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, I have decided that France will recognize the state of Palestine. I will make this solemn announcement before the United Nations General Assembly this coming September." Netanyahu responded to the announcement with anger, stating, "We strongly condemn President Macron's decision to recognize a Palestinian state next to Tel Aviv in the wake of the October 7 massacre. Such a move rewards terror and risks creating another Iranian proxy, just as Gaza became. A Palestinian state in these conditions would be a launchpad to annihilate Israel, not to live in peace beside it. Let's be clear, the Palestinians do not seek a state alongside Israel, they seek a state instead of Israel." A total of 147 countries recognize the state of Palestine. The UK is not one of them. That article was written by Lucy Jackson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 25th of July, 2025, from the Culture section. Kneecap banned from entering Hungary ahead of Zygot. Article written by Lucy Jackson. Irish rap group Kneecap have been banned from entering Hungary ahead of their scheduled appearance at a music festival. The group, who are outspoken supporters of Palestine, were due to perform at Zygot Festival on August 11th and remain on the lineup on its website. Government spokesman Zoltan Kovacs wrote on social media platform Twitter X that the decision to ban Kneecap was due to its members repeatedly engage in anti-Semitic hate speech, supporting terrorism and terrorist groups. Hungary has zero tolerance for anti-Semitism in any form. Their planned performance posed a national security threat, and for this reason the group has been formally banned from Hungary for 3 years. If they enter, expulsion will follow under international norms. Kneecap have had several shows cancelled in recent months, including the Transmit Festival in Glasgow. The group organised a replacement gig at the city's O2 Academy, which sold out within minutes. They are set to perform again at the OVO Hydra Arena in November. The trio, comprised of Liam O'Hanna, Nisha O'Caroline and JJ O'Doherty, were formed in Belfast and released their first single in 2017. They hit the headlines recently after O'Hanna, who performs under the name Mochara, was charged with a terror offence relating to allegedly displaying a flag in support of Hezbollah. In May, the Metropolitan Police said the group were being investigated by counter-terrorism police after videos emerged allegedly showing them shouting, "Up Hamas! Up Hezbollah!" and "Kill your local MP," which has since been dropped. The group apologised to the families of murdered MPs and said they have never supported Hamas or Hezbollah, which are banned in the UK. They were also investigated over their set at Glastonbury Festival in June, but last week Avon and Somerset Police confirmed they would be taking no further action. That article was written by Lucy Jackson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 25th of July 2025, from the news section. Petition against the Open at Trump Turnberry hits huge milestone. Article written by Steph Braun. More than 50,000 people have signed a petition against the Open being held at Trump Turnberry. The petition, on 38 degrees, was created a couple of months ago, but has picked up a head of steam in the last 24 hours ahead of the US President's visit to Scotland. Around 30,000 people have put their name to the campaign created by Chantal Bowman Boyles over the last day. The venue on Scotland's west coast has not hosted the Open since its fourth visit in 2009, when Stuart Kink denied a then 59-year-old Tom Watson a fairy tale's sixth claret jug. R&A officials have met with Donald Trump's son Eric this month to discuss the major returning to Turnberry. R&A Chief Executive Mark Darbin said there are still big logistical issues with the tournament being held at the venue, with the number of spectators having spiked considerably in recent years. A total of 120,000 people attended the championship in 2009. Last week's Open at Royal Portrush in Northern Ireland had around 280,000 spectators, while 250,000 were at Royal Troon in 2024. The petition states, "The Open Championship must not give in to the UK government's lobbying and allow Donald Trump to host one of the world's biggest, oldest and respected golf tournaments at any of the golf tournaments he owns in the UK. Donald Trump is a divisive individual who is busy breaking the global economy and promoting racist, homophobic, misogynistic and transphobic messages around the world. He is ignoring national and international law, ruining people's lives, imprisoning people without due process and bullying Ukraine. He should not be rewarded by our country." In April, it was reported senior Whitehall officials had been quizzing top golf bosses whether they can host the 2028 Open Championship at Turnberry in a bid to win the US President's favour. One source described the talks to The Guardian as direct lobbying from the UK government. Meanwhile, others said officials had asked about hypothetical problems with the idea, rather than insisting that it happen. One person with knowledge of the discussions told the paper, "The government is doing everything it can to get close to Trump. One concrete thing is that the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS, have been involved in pushing for the Open to return to Trump-owned Turnberry." Two other people briefed on conversations between the US President and Keir Starmer reportedly said Trump had asked the Prime Minister multiple times about hosting the Open at Turnberry. In comments on the petition, supporters have laid out their reasons for signing. One person said, "The UK is a tolerant, welcoming nation and generous of spirit. These are values that have no meaning with Donald Trump, who has nothing nice or kind to say about anyone. We should not countenance any welcome to him at any time." Another signatory said, "This man is a toxic brand, and no way should the R&A be considering awarding the Open Championship to one of his courses." That article was written by Steph Braun and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 25th of July 2025, from the news section. Rachel Reeves in Scotland to announce £66 million transport funding. Article written by Steph Braun. Rachel Reeves will announce £66 million of funding for transport projects in Scotland, with the Chancellor claiming the cash shows the Labour UK government is investing in Britain's renewal. Scottish Secretary Ian Murray said the money would make a real difference to people's daily lives. The money will go towards projects linked to new investment zones and advanced manufacturing sites supported by the UK government in Scotland. 3 key transport schemes are to benefit, with plans to create direct links between these new economic hubs and local towns in the west of Scotland. The largest chunk of cash, some £38.7 million, will go to Renfrewshire Council to help link Paisley Town Centre with both Glasgow Airport and the nearby Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District Scotland, AMIDS. As part of this, new walking, cycling, bus and car links will be built, allowing local people to benefit from the growth of high-value manufacturing in Renfrewshire. Another £23.7 million will go to North Ayrshire Council to upgrade the B714 road, allowing faster travel between the towns of Ardrossan, Saltcoats and Stevenston and Glasgow, and cutting traffic in Kilwinning. It comes after the Chancellor pledged to find the cash for this work in last month's spending review. In addition, the Scottish Government is being given an extra £3.45 million to suggest ways in which the A75 in Dumfries and Galloway can be upgraded. The road there links the port in Cairn Ryan, where ferries sail to Northern Ireland, with the rest of the UK, and as a result is seen as being vital for both transport connections and the economy. Reeves, who is visiting Renfrewshire on Friday, said the UK government was pledging billions to back Scottish jobs, industry and renewal. She added, "That's why we're investing in the major transport projects, including exploring upgrades to the A75 that local communities have been calling for. Whilst previous governments oversaw a decade of decline on our transport infrastructure, we're investing in Britain's renewal. This £66 million investment is exactly what our plan for change is about, investing in what matters to you in the places that you live." Murray added, "This £66 million investment in Scotland's roads demonstrates the UK government's commitment to improving infrastructure and driving economic growth in all parts of the UK as part of our plan for change. This investment is yet another example of how the UK government is building the foundations for a stronger, more prosperous future that benefits communities right across Scotland." However, SNP MSP Kevin Stewart said Reeves should take the opportunity to apologise to Scots during her visit. Hitting out at the Chancellor, Stewart said, "On the week it was confirmed that Scottish energy bills will rise to pay for an English nuclear power plant, the Chancellor has some cheek to pass off old spending commitments as her own. Labour thinks Scotland should be grateful for receiving a share of money we pay to Westminster in taxes. Folks need real action on the cost of living under Labour, not reheated commitments that Westminster has already announced. Labour promised that everyone's energy bills would be cut by £300 when they came to power. That was a lie. Reeves should apologise on behalf of her party for this lie during her trip to Scotland." That article was written by Steph Braun and read to you by Elizabeth.
From The National, Monday the 28th of July 2025. From the news section, exclusive. Aberdeen school under fire for pipe band performance for Donald Trump. Article written by Hamish Morrison. A school is under fire for getting its pipe band to perform for convicted felon and US President Donald Trump. Robert Gordon's College in Aberdeen is expected to pipe in the President as he arrives in Aberdeenshire later on Monday. Parents at the school reacted with fury and claimed it was kept under wraps. "The reputation of the school is on the line," said a mother with a child at the private school. "It's a symbolic endorsement of him." She added, "He said that they're not going to promote it on their social media platforms like they normally would with the pipe band. Well, that kind of confirms that you know it's an ill-advised gig." Another source, who wished to remain anonymous, told the Herald his 3 children had attended the school, which charges annual fees of up to £18,322, and said, "It's a school, let's be under no doubt, with children from very wealthy people's families who have an interest in promoting themselves in front of this man." He added that it was, to say the least, embarrassing, and to say the worst is insulting, noting Trump's friendship with the notorious paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and his own criminal record. The source, a doctor in Aberdeen, added that there was a tradition of standing up to oppression, and said it was a pity that people were welcoming this man. Another mum with a child at the school told The National that Trump was dangerous, adding, "I find it disturbing the thought of local school children playing for him when, on his orders, children in the US are taken from their schools by immigration and customs enforcement. Children in Gaza are starving, maimed, orphaned and killed. When the man in question is closely associated with the world's best-known paedophile and sex trafficker." A letter, shared with this paper from the Aberdeen branch of Healthcare Workers for Peace, was sent to the headmaster, Robin McPherson. It said, "Mr. Trump is on record for supporting the ethnic cleansing of 2 million people in Gaza. Since October the 8th, more than 1,500 healthcare workers have been killed by the Israeli Defense Forces, and Gaza's healthcare system has been decimated using weapons supplied by the USA. Gazans are now facing famine, and the United Nations and more than 100 humanitarian organisations have condemned the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an American organisation which has killed more than 1,000 of the starving civilians seeking aid. Mr. Trump supports, and indeed endorses, this organisation. We sincerely hope these are not the values your school aspires to promote, and urge you to reconsider how appropriate it is for the local children in your school's pipe band to be associated with these heinous crimes." A spokesperson for Robert Gordon's College said, "Our pipe band is regularly invited to perform at a wide variety of regional events, and is taking part in a number of these events this summer, often attended by dignitaries and political leaders. These opportunities are offered to pupils and parents on an opt-in, non-political basis, and provide valuable performance showcases for our musicians." And that article was in exclusive by Hamish Morrison. From The National, Monday the 28th of July 2025. In the news section, Donald Trump praises fantastic Labour crackdown on immigration. Article written by Hamish Morrison. Donald Trump has praised Keir Starmer's immigration policy, saying the Prime Minister is doing a fantastic thing by cracking down on small boats crossings. The US President was speaking at his golf course in Turnberry, Ayrshire, flanked by Starmer and his wife Victoria Starmer. Asked about Labour's mission to stop boats carrying migrants across the English Channel, the US President said, "If you're stopping immigration and stopping the wrong people, my hats are off to you. You're doing not a good thing, you're doing a fantastic thing. So I know nothing about the boats, but if the boats are loaded up with bad people, and they usually are because, other countries don't send their best when they send people that they don't want, and they're not stupid people, and they send the people that they don't want." Turning to the Prime Minister, Trump added, "And I've heard you've taken a much stronger stance in this." Starmer said he was very pleased to have signed a returns agreement with France, which will see people traded across the Channel with France, with some asylum seekers sent back and others brought to the UK. The Prime Minister has been accused of treating people like cargo over the deal, which has sparked serious alarm from human rights organisations. Trump added, Europe is going to is a much different place than it was just 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it says here. They've got to get their act together. If they don't, you're not going to have Europe anymore, as you know it, and you can't do that. This is a magnificent part of the world, and you cannot ruin it. You cannot let people come in here illegally. And what happens is, there'll be murderers, there'll be drug dealers, there'll be all sorts of things that other countries don't want, and they send them to you, and they send them to us, and you've got to stop them. Labour have pledged to bring down net migration, which is calculated by the number of people entering the country minus those emigrating, and numbers are falling after reaching record highs under the Conservatives. According to the Migration Observatory at Oxford University, this was expected regardless of the change in government or any new policies, and was fueled by policy changes, including much tougher visa rules brought in by the Tories. However, small boat arrivals, which make up only around 3 to 4% of immigration overall, have increased and are close to the record levels reached in 2022. Stricter visa rules have sparked a fall in overseas student applications, as well as a decline in the number of people coming to the UK to work in health and social care, prompting fears in both sectors of the economy. And that article was written by Hamish Morrison and read by E. McKenna. From the National, Monday the 28th of July 2025, Politics. Only SNP majority can deliver Indy Ref 2, John Swinney says. By Fiona Brown. John Swinney has declared that winning a majority of SNP MSPs at next year's Holyrood election is now the essential route to securing a second independence referendum. The First Minister will bring a motion to the SNP's upcoming party conference that abandons the previous position, held by Nicola Sturgeon, that a joint pro-independence majority of SNP and Green MSPs was sufficient to mandate a vote. Instead, Swinney said that it is a clear-cut SNP majority is the only proven path to achieving a legally recognised referendum, citing the precedent set in 2011 when Alex Salmond led the SNP to a majority, resulting in the 2014 vote agreed with Westminster. Writing in the Daily Record, Swinney said, "For us to achieve that independence, the first step is to secure a legal referendum recognised by all. In 2011, we secured that reliable and dependable route when the SNP achieved a majority of seats at Holyrood. That is the only mechanism that's ever been proven to deliver such a vote, so that is what we need to deliver again." He continued, "That is why I have submitted a motion to the SNP conference proposing that we work to deliver a majority of SNP MSPs in the Scottish Parliament to secure that referendum on independence. The SNP has high ambitions for Scotland, and we must be bold to deliver on those ambitions. We must be ready to follow the path which we know can lead us to an independent state. The shift in strategy comes amid growing calls within the independence movement for clarity following the Supreme Court's 2022 ruling that Holyrood does not have the legal authority to hold a referendum without UK government consent. A senior SNP source told the Record that the Scottish Government still believes an SNP Green majority should be enough to justify Indy Ref 2, but added, "The reality of the past 4 years shows this is not going to happen. This is a pragmatic step forward that Westminster will find harder to ignore." Swinney's renewed focus on a single party majority is also seen as a direct appeal to undecided voters and independent supporters seeking a clear, deliverable mandate. While some in the wider movement believe a Holyrood or Westminster majority should be enough to begin negotiations on independence without a referendum, Swinney is firmly of the view that a democratic vote remains essential. His latest intervention reaffirms both his personal and political commitment to delivering independence through a credible and internationally recognised process. With the 2026 Holyrood election on the horizon, Swinney's message is clear that only an SNP majority will open the door to Scotland's future as an independent nation. That article was written by Fiona Brown and read by Ian McKenna. From the National, Monday the 28th of July 2025, from the news section. Teenager dies after crash with ambulance in middle of night. Article written by Ben Model. A teenager has died after a crash involving an ambulance on a major road. Traffic officers are appealing for witnesses after the fatal collision on the A78 in North Ayrshire. The incident happened shortly after 2:30 am on Monday, July 28th, on the road's southbound carriageway between the Pennyburn roundabout and the junction with the B779 at Kilwinning. It involved an e-scooter and an ambulance. The 19-year-old rider of the e-scooter, a man, was pronounced dead at the scene. Officers said no one from the ambulance was injured in the incident. Following the crash, the road was closed for several hours. It has since reopened. Sergeant Jim Dewar said, "Our thoughts are with the family and friends of the man who has died and everyone affected by this crash. Our inquiries into the circumstances are ongoing, and I would urge anyone with information or who may have dashcam footage from around the time to get in touch. If you can help, please call 101, quoting reference 0324 of 28th of July 2025. That article was written by Ben Waddell.
This is from The National on Tuesday, 29th July 2025, from the comments section. Labour engulfed in major online safety furore. This article is by Hamish Morrison. Calling your opponent a nonce or a friend of nonce's is meant to be the argument ender par excellence. It worked for rapper Kendrick Lamar. Why not Technology Secretary Peter Kyle? Kyle delivered a quite extraordinary, spittle-flecked response to the critics of the Online Safety Act on Tuesday morning. Nigel Farage is on the same side as paedophiles, Kyle spat. Not just any pedos either. The minister said that Farage would be on the same side as Jimmy Savile, were he still alive. Going even further later on, he said that anyone wanting to overturn the controversial legislation is on the side of predators. That includes more than 400,000 people who have signed a petition calling for the Act to be repealed and could expand to organisations like Liberty, Big Brother Watch, Index on Censorship, and the parent companies of Facebook and Wikipedia. Even Ian Russell, the chair of the Molly Russell Foundation, a child protection charity, said that the Act was not up to snuff and had to be replaced by something even tougher. Who knew paedophiles had so many allies? Quite why Labour are defending a Tory piece of legislation, the Act was passed by the Conservatives but is only coming into force now, is a question with a couple of answers. The first is a political one. Protect our children has become a potent rallying cry for the right, identifying bogeymen in everyone from asylum seekers to drag queens. This is Labour's counterblast. You're putting children at risk. If you're against us, you're on the same side as child abusers. As a strategy, it could work. Many parents will doubtless be glad to see the government come down hard on the worst bits of the internet. It will certainly be welcomed by many that unregulated social media companies will be held responsible for removing content like child pornography and blocking children's access to sexual content or instructions for committing acts of self-harm or suicide. There's unlikely to be great amounts of sympathy for arguments about the sanctity of end-to-end encryption or free online speech. The flip side. Are Reform UK railing against the Act, which this week enforced age restrictions on adult content, as a means to target the porn-addicted misanthropic young men likely to make up its youth base at the next election? Quite possibly. The other reason that Kyle and his Labour comrades so aggressively back the Act is that they genuinely believe in it. They do not care about warnings that by introducing strict age checks, people might be pushed into downloading software to evade restrictions and access the darker corners of the internet. Demand for virtual private networks, which allow people to browse the web away from the prying eyes of regulators, is soaring. Kyle, as a rational being, must consider it plausible that the Act could have unintended consequences, though he shows no signs that he does. He seems to believe that the intention of legislation is its effect. He appears to care only about why laws were introduced, not how they work. Keir Starmer's response to criticism of the Act earlier this week took a similar approach. I don't see that as a free speech issue. I see that as child protection. It surely cannot be beyond him that the two are not mutually exclusive. So it was with the SNP's doomed named person scheme. Ministers were warned in 2016 that while the aim of the policy was unquestionably legitimate, it would violate people's human rights. It took another 3 years before it was officially ditched by the Scottish Government. With Donald Trump's sidekick JD Vance threatening consequences for governments insufficiently amenable to his definition of free speech, Perhaps Starmer and co. might catch up with the laws of unintended consequences sooner rather than later. And that article was written by Hamish Morrison and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 29th of July 2025 from the comments section. On independence strategy, John Swinney has lost the dressing room. This article is by David Burkett. This plan might have stood a better chance back in 2021 when Nicola Sturgeon was widely seen as a steadier hand on the tiller than Boris Johnson during the pandemic. We could point to a string of recent examples of competent governance and say, imagine what we could do with independence, with the clear implication that we'd be amplifying those successes. Fast forward to 2026, we're on our third minister in a single parliamentary term. Operation Branch Form still lingers. Major projects are behind schedule. A minister racks up £11,000 in roaming charges and keeps their job. The deposit return scheme is scrapped, and the list goes on. When we repeat the call for independence, people will quite rightly ask, what would we amplify now? We won our majority in 2011 because we were competent, collaborative and effective. We delivered despite the composition of the Parliament and limits of devolution. That gave us the credibility to ask for more. What successes do we have to point to from the 2021 to 2026 term? Given the reality we're facing, the idea that we can significantly improve the SNP's position ahead of Holyrood 2026 is ambitious to say the least. That's why I, along with many activists, are calling on the party leadership to recognise a hard truth. If we're serious about delivering a mandate for independence, we may well need to work with others to achieve it. At a time when we need inspiration and hope, we're faced instead with disengagement and despair. At a time when we need bold strategy and an inclusive campaign that brings the whole movement with us, we get caution, dogma, and it's my ball politics. Not all of this is John Swinney's fault, but as the current leader, one thing clearly is. John believes, many feel mistakenly, that he alone holds the constitutional authority to decide the party's independence strategy. And despite the best efforts of committed activists to urge a change in course, he's pressing ahead, undeterred and unbending. At the recent National Council, John laid out this plan to those assembled. Many of us questioned it, respectfully but robustly. But not one person, not a single delegate, got up to say, "John, you've got this, I believe in you." That silence spoke volumes. Sadly, John wasn't listening. Put simply, he's lost the dressing room. And that article was written by David Burkett and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 29th of July 2025 from the Culture section. Scottish Beach Bar named among the best in the UK. This article is by Alistair Ferguson. A bar on a popular Scottish island in North Ayrshire has been named among some of the best in the UK. Cladach Beach House on the Isle of Arran was named the 6th best beach bar in the UK by The Times. It was the only Scottish beach bar that featured on the list, which included entries from across the UK like the Shanty in Portrush, Northern Ireland, and the Bournemouth-based Sobo in Dorset. Travel writer for the newspaper, Sarah Turner, described Cladach Beach House as the most beautifully situated cocktail bar in Scotland, which overlooks the Firth of Clyde and is surrounded by trees and sand. An offshoot from the Arran Botanicals drinks firm, who pair local plants and flowers with cocktails and alcoholic drinks, the beach bar was founded in 2022. Located around a 10-minute drive south of the ferry port in the village of Brodick, the Cladach Beach House is described as situated next to a picturesque beach with golden sand and blue waters that would make you forget you're even in Scotland. The Cladach Beach House features both indoor and outdoor seating, as well as a log burner and an outdoor fire pit for the cooler summer evenings. It also serves up a seasonal menu of cocktails to enjoy on the beach while taking in the tranquil views out over the water. And the full list of the UK's best beach bars, according to the Times, is: at number 1, the Watering Hole in Perranporth, Cornwall; 2, the Pilot, Folkestone in Kent; 3, Sobo, Bournemouth, Dorset; 4, Blackpool Sands Cafe, Lounge and Bar in Dartmouth, Devon; 5, Shanty in Portrush, Northern Ireland; and number 6, Cladach Beach House, Isle of Arran, North Ayrshire; and finally, number 7, the Landing in Beadnell Bay, Northumberland. And that article was written by Alistair Ferguson and read by Lynn McNeil.
This is from The National of Wednesday, the 30th of July, 2025, from the news section. Second arrest made as man seriously injured in Edinburgh shooting. This article is by Alistair Ferguson. A second man has been arrested in connection with a shooting in Edinburgh that left another man injured, police have said. Armed police were called to the Halesland Gardens area of the capital following reports of a firearm being discharged at around 3:40 p.m. on Thursday, July 24th. A 23-year-old man was taken to hospital and was treated for serious injuries sustained to his arm in the incident. Police confirmed on Tuesday that a 25-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the incident. A 36-year-old man was also previously arrested in connection last week, but has since been released. Police said inquiries into the incident are ongoing. A Police Scotland spokesperson said a 25-year-old man has been arrested following an investigation into the discharge of a firearm in Edinburgh. The incident occurred on Thursday, the 24th of July 2025 on Halesland Gardens, Edinburgh, around 3:40 p.m. A 23-year-old man attended hospital for treatment to injuries sustained to his arm from the incident. Inquiries remain ongoing. That article was by Alistair Ferguson. This is from The National of Wednesday, the 30th of July 2025, from the news section. SNP and Greens slam Starmer's conditional Palestine stance. This article is by Fiona Brown. The SNP and Scottish Greens have warned that recognition of Palestine must be irreversible and free of political caveats. In response to Prime Minister Keir Starmer's statement that the UK could back Palestinian statehood at the UN General Assembly in September, conditional on an Israeli ceasefire and a commitment to a two-state solution, John Swinney made clear that such recognition must not be a bargaining chip. Having called on the UK government to recognise the state of Palestine, I welcome the intent behind this announcement, the First Minister said. However, recognition of a Palestinian state should be irreversible. Recognition must not be conditional and must be backed by sanctions against Israel if the violence continues. Swinney called for an immediate ceasefire and urgent access for humanitarian aid to address the catastrophic man-made famine in Gaza. He reiterated his support for a two-state solution, saying it remains the only viable path to lasting peace. A two-state solution is the only way that a Palestinian and Israeli peoples can have a future living side by side in peace and security, he said. The Palestinian people deserve no less. His remarks came as the death toll in Gaza reportedly surpassed 60,000, a milestone Swinney described as truly horrific and a shame upon us all. He demanded that Israel commit to ending the killings and comply with international investigations into war crimes and genocide. Swinney also called for the unconditional release of all hostages, noting the urgency of halting further bloodshed. The Scottish Greens echoed Swinney's condemnation of conditionality, insisting that Palestinian statehood should not be subject to Israeli cooperation. They criticised Starmer's announcement, which stated the UK could support recognition only if Israel agrees to halt its assault and engage in peace talks, and only if the annexation of the West Bank ceases. The Greens, who have long supported Palestinian statehood and denounced the occupation, described the UK government's framing as dangerous and insulting. They warned that Starmer's conditions effectively allow Israel to veto Palestinian sovereignty while continuing to displace, starve, and murder Gazan civilians. Co-leader Patrick Harvey condemned Starmer's position, calling it an insult to the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Recognition of Palestine is decades overdue and should not be conditional, Harvey said. He pointed to some of the worst war crimes recorded in recent history, many of them live-streamed by perpetrators and met with silence or complicity from Western governments. Harvey said Gaza has been decimated, entire generations of families have been wiped out, and the most basic universal human rights have been stripped away. Starmer's words would carry some meaning if he immediately recognized the state of Palestine, called out the ongoing genocide, and ended UK complicity in arming and training the Israeli military. The Greens have called on the Labour government to recognize Palestine without delay and to stop aiding Israeli forces via weapons sales and military collaboration. They argue that Starmer's delay is a betrayal of a people at risk of being extinguished by genocide. Harvey stressed that recognition must be a starting point, not an end. He said, even if recognition for Palestine does come, it must be only the beginning, a moment when the international community steps in to stop the slaughter, end the occupation, and hold Israel's leaders to account for their crimes in front of the International Criminal Court. That article was by Fiona Brown. This is from The National of Wednesday, 30th of July 2025, from the news section. Victorian approach to welfare shames Labour. This article is by Seamus Logan. A new report by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the JRF, highlights the lack of progress made by the Labour government on key measures of hardship. With more than 7 million low-income families still going without essentials, the JRF's cost of living tracker shines the spotlight on just how acute this situation is for low-income families with 3 or more children, with almost 9 in 10 going without the essentials and the highest number of families in arrears or holding a loan for essentials since their tracking began. This is a terrible indictment of Keir Starmer's government. No progress, no change, the very opposite of what Labour promised. Indeed, what strikes me most is just how little has changed since they came into power. The SNP are still pushing the UK government to scrap the 2-child cap and implement a similar benefit to our transformational Scottish child payment. Westminster is still digging its heels in. My former colleague Alison Thulis was dogged in challenging the Tory government on the 2-child cap. Yet here we are under Labour, and the asks remain the same while the situation is getting worse. The JRF says their modelling does not include impacts of cuts to health-related elements of universal credit for future claimants currently working its way through Parliament. Damning reports like this should focus minds ahead of the delayed publication of the Child Poverty Strategy, with its recommendation to get rid of the two-child cap and strengthen the foundations of the social settlement. But is the government listening? Are they reading these reports? Are they paying attention to best practice elsewhere? That is, in Scotland. On paper, Labour say they are. For instance, the Secretaries of State for Work and Pensions and for Education say in their foreword to the introduction ahead of this new strategy that there is a lot they can learn from action already taken in Scotland. But in the Chamber, it's a whole other ball game. Not a week goes by that I don't think of that phrase, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, while I'm sitting in the House of Commons listening to what seems to be a coordinated strategy by Labour to attack the Scottish Government in Holyrood at every available opportunity, even when the focus is very much on their own failures at Westminster. That's politics, I hear you say, but it's more than that. In fact, I'd go as far to say it's like a kind of blame shifting, to use psychological terminology. A perfect example comes from just a couple of weeks ago, when the Secretary of State for Scotland, Ian Murray MP, was answering questions in the Chamber on the government's spending review. My colleague MP Stephen Gethins challenged Murray on his party's failure to scrap the two-child cap, only to be met with a defensive volley on the number of children that are homeless in Scotland. A little rudimentary digging on Shelter England's website, and you can see that of course Murray failed to highlight that in England there are 164,040 children living in temporary accommodation with their families, which is the highest number on record and represents a 15% increase in the last year alone. Additionally, there are 126,040 households in England experiencing homelessness in temporary accommodation, another record high, and a 16% increase in 12 months. This is hardly a record to be proud of, and not a position of strength from which to point the finger at other governments. Fortunately, a decent amount of finger-pointing has already been done by Labour's own MPs, with their welfare cuts described as Dickensian. Those MPs have been punished subsequently, more blame shifting rather than addressing the key problem, which is Labour's terrible policy decisions, and only one of them was a Scottish Labour MP, while the others continue to bow and scrape to number 10. Even the UN has waded in to highlight how Labour's welfare cuts could threaten the human rights of disabled people, and this from a government led by a former human rights lawyer. It reminded me of the UN's comments on the Tory government's welfare policies, with the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty describing workhouse conditions and the systematic immiseration of the British population thanks to austerity. Red or blue, it's the same old, same old. Collaborating with Scotland on best practice on social security, not just with our Scottish child payment, but with our efforts to reinstate the winter fuel payment for pensioners before Labour's major U-turn, and now our upcoming mitigation of the two-child cap, would change the narrative on Labour's Victorian approach to welfare. This would signal a more grown-up approach to politics than the current tribal mudslinging variety that Labour favours. Don't hold your breath. So every time you hear a Labour MP, particularly the Scottish ones, have a poke at Scotland and the SNP government at Holyrood, remember this coordinated blame shift, because behind every snide and spurious comment about Scotland lies a truth that Labour can't deny. They're failing to make any progress, and fast. All the more reason for Scotland to be rid of Westminster for good. That article was by Seamus Logan.
From the National, Monday the 28th of July 2025. From the comment section. It's hard to see New Left Party cutting through in Scotland. Article written by Tommy Shepherd. So, another new party. Politics is getting crowded. What's this party with no name about? What does it mean for Scotland? The first thing to say is that if it is able to break out of the factions and abbreviations which abound in the terrain up to the left of Labour, and with 300,000 claimed sign-ups and a poll rating of 10% it just might, then it marks a very big change in socialist thinking. For more than a century, socialists who wanted to change capitalism have rubbed along in the Labour Party with those who just wanted a bit more from it. Now large sections of the Labour left look set to give up the ghost. For me, that ship sailed long ago. It's more than 2 decades since I became convinced that using the powers that Scotland would get with political independence offered a much better prospect of changing the world than trying to reform a British state run by people still steeped in the mindset of empire. Nonetheless, it's an important debate. The political character of England should matter greatly to Scotland, and this new party might even play a role here. In one sense, the Labour left has nowhere to go. Those now in control of the party have made it perfectly clear that radical views are no longer welcome within it. They have been demonised and purged. Labour is manifesting every bit as much intolerance and authoritarianism as its internal structures as it does in government. But how did it come to this? A short time ago, the Labour left had more power than at any point in the party's history. Corbyn was leader and commanded the considerable resources provided to the parliamentary opposition by the state. The left controls the conference and the NEC, and the mobilisation of the grassroots through Momentum was impressive in its day. Yet, within a few short years it had all evaporated. Corbyn and others left, or were expelled, policy was abandoned, wholesale, and the Labour conference would sing the national anthem with no visible dissent. It has been a remarkable transition in both speed and scale. In part this is because the Corbyn project failed abjectly, in its own terms. Jeremy became leader by accident, and he wasn't very good at it. I watched for years in the House of Commons the breathtaking disloyalty of the right-wing Labour parliamentarians towards the Corbyn front bench. It was embarrassing. Never have I seen such hostility and hate between political parties, never mind within one. But no one got suspended or expelled or deselected. They were ignored, left alone to operate as a party within a party. Despite his strength in the wider party organisation, Corbyn never moved against his enemy within. Too naive or too nice. Either way, a fatal mistake. Corbyn also never got out of his silo, unwilling or incapable of moving beyond his natural support. He should have developed a narrative about Brexit or constitutional reform that would have galvanised a wider alliance which the left could lead. He didn't. Once defeated, his opponents lost no time in eradicating any possible legacy. These right-wing parliamentarians had been busy making plans. They were organised by a ruthless and clever Irishman named Morgan McSweeney under the banner Labour Together. McSweeney built a strategy for power inspired by Odysseus. Seeing the popularity of left policies in the party and among the electorate, he argued for Corbynism without Corbyn. But he needed someone to front it who couldn't immediately be outed as a right-wing hack. Step forward the hapless Keir Starmer. You'll cringe to look now at the 10-point platform McSweeney drew up for Starmer's leadership bid. Common ownership, higher income tax on top earners, improving welfare and more. It worked at the time. Those Labour members who hadn't left after their leader fell lapped it up. Once in position, McSweeney and his acolytes didn't show any hesitation that might have come from wanting to be nice or fair. At breakneck speed and with ruthless efficiency, they brushed aside anyone in their way, including many on the soft left, which they saw as a gateway for extremists. They won through deceit, but at the price of the party itself, which is why we've got a new one. So, what does it mean for us? We've just got used to Scotland being in a polarity in which 6 parties compete. Are we now to have 7? It's hard to see. Certainly there's plenty of discontent within Labour ranks, but not nearly as much in places like London. Besides, there's already plenty of options where the disenchanted could escape to. And across it all lies the independence question. Not really something you can avoid. Is it plausible, or possible, for a new party to say we're really radical and want a complete overhaul of the system, but we are agnostic on whether Scotland should be an independent country or remain in the UK? Especially when they would, by definition, be living proof of the failure of the latter option. That was a comment piece, written by Tommy Shepherd and read by E. McKenna. From the National, Monday the 28th of July 2025, from the comment section. Sign of a bright energy future, but for whom? I saw John Swinney visiting Eyemouth last week and singing the praises of the Neart Al Gotha wind farm in the Firth of Forth. Article written by Kenny McCaskill. Scotland's tragedy continues. First it was the oil and gas robbery, now it's been repeated with the renewables. For sure the Energy Minister was right. It is a wonder of engineering and a sign of a bright energy future. But for whom? Almost all the benefits are passing Scotland by, just as they did in their first great energy bounty when oil was discovered in the North Sea. Oil is still there, and still being drilled for, though not as much as it should be, and it's only weeks since Grangemouth Oil Refinery closed. Of course, there's a nice shiny new office block on Eyemouth Pier for NNG, as it is referred to. The jobs there are few but welcome all the same. But where's the real work going? And, more importantly, who owns and profits? NNG might lie between Lothians and Fife, but ownership lies abroad and includes in the name. Neart na Gotha is Gaelic, but the Irish version, the reason being that the wind farm is owned not just by EDF, the State Energy Company of France, but also ESB, the Republic of Ireland's state electricity company. The Irish Consul General told me it is the single business investment ESB has ever made out with the island of Ireland. All this means that profits from the wonder Swinney saw are going to Paris and Dublin and not to Edinburgh. But it's far worse than that. Not one turbine for its being manufactured in Scotland, despite methyl being visible from it, never mind other ports and yards in Scotland being available which are crying out for work. Even if the excuse is the lack of capacity here in turbine manufacturing, which itself is lamentable and indicative of a shameful lack of an industrial strategy, what about other works, such as subsea cabling, the layer of pipeline, and the assembly of the units, along with the ship contracts? As with ownership, they've gone abroad, with firms from Italy, Belgium and far beyond winning out and Scotland languishing without. Even the jobs that are coming to Scotland are limited. Beyond the smaller vessels at Eyemouth, there was hope for maritime crews providing for the major construction and cabling work from Montrose. So thought a former constituent of mine who left the deep sea tankers for a job closer to home. Within a few days, he and the rest of the UK crew had been laid off and replaced by South Asian labour. When you're working beyond territorial waters, and that's where NNG lies, UK employment law doesn't apply. What a rip-off. And the NNG tragedy won't be alone, as it's not the only Scottish offshore wind farm owned by foreign state companies. China, Norway, Sweden and United Arab Emirates also have sites. There's a double whammy here, and not just in the working contracts being fitted away. When the Scotland auction took place, under the auspices and control of the Scottish, not UK government, offshore sites were sold off for a song. The £800 million raised was trumpeted as a triumph by then First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. yet within a matter of weeks was shown to be a paltry sum. Less than 25% of what has been auctioned off in Scotland was sold in the US by New York State for a site off Long Island, and for somewhere in the region of £4.3 billion. And believe me, the European energy market, of which Scotland is a critical part, is larger than the US's. But we were told that all was well and we'd be getting the supply jobs. Well, where are they? A few jobs at Hymouth and a few ribs going out of that port aren't what we were led to believe we'd get, and they're probably less than Ireland would have from just LNG alone. What a waste and what a letdown. The Scottish tragedy has now been repeated, but when it was oil and gas we had no parliament. Now we have Holyrood, and shamefully, it is being complicit as well as supine. Yes, energy is largely reserved, but the ScotWind sell-off was wholly down to Holyrood. This is our great opportunity, as the First Minister said, but it had to actually happen, not just be an empty rhetoric. While Swinney was at Eyemouth Harbour, I was at the funeral of an independent stalwart and was reminded of the eulogy of his role in the anti-poll tax campaign. Back then, he and his compadre, who sat next to me in the chapel, painted "Pay no poll tax" on the bridges along the M8. No easy task, but appreciated by many. Things should be better and easier for us now, but as well as failures, there's been a dampening of the spirit. Radicalism, let alone political actions, have been decried, as shown of the genocide in Palestine. We need some competency in our government, but also require some fire back in our movement. That article was written by Kenny McCaskill. From the National, Wednesday the 30th of July 2025, from the Culture section. Letters. Knowledge of tartan's origins vital to grasp our history. An interesting long letter from Douglas McCulloch concerning the origins of Clan Tartan. Letters, July 28. Personally, I cannot disagree with him and his summation of the origin of today's colourful array of so-called Clan Tartan. Not so much today, but not too many years ago, I was a reenactor of historical periods. Initially, when I lived in England, reenacting the English Civil Wars between 1646 to 1651. A few years before I migrated to Scotland, I met up with the Scottish contingent of that period, which eventually led me to jump 100 years into 1745 to 1746. The last Jacobite period, if you will. In each period, anyone and everyone had to be perfectly correct in what clothing we wore, what armaments we used, and, if we partook in living history camping, then what domestic utensils, bedding and container chests were used. Men, women and children of all ages. In order to succeed in this important aspect, England had a living history market twice a year where ready-made equipment could be purchased from experts in their field, or the correct material could also be purchased to create your own wardrobe, etc. The point of all this is that historical knowledge was the backbone necessary to not only wear the correct garb, but to have learned about its origins, such as the material for the great kilt of the 18th century. Reading was obviously the necessary source for information, and from various sources of authoritative writers. For myself, I learnt that with clans, regardless of which glen they dwelt, most had a local wool spinner and weaver. The colour used in dyeing the wool came from natural sources, as in vegetation or crushed stone. This was more or less the origin of how different clans, no matter how related to each other, had their variations of so-called colour and weave of wool into the crisscross pattern we associate as tartan. Homemade dyes would be quite pale in some cases. I tried it myself using onion and carrot. The weave would also have been varied according to the choice of the weaver. I expect there might be contradiction to my resourced information, but there was a general consensus among us reenactors, wherever we came from, during discussions about our hobby around the evening campfires. Ideas were shared and information appreciated. Alan Magnus Bennett, Fife. The letter by Gordon Ian MacLeod in the Sunday National, July 27, referencing John McGrath's great play, brought to mind a recent article in the Daily Mail regarding an ongoing case at the Court of Session where the parties in dispute are a wealthy, non-Scottish landowner and a large energy company, also non-Scottish. The dispute concerned constraint payments, credits given to energy companies to turn off wind turbines when either the demand for electricity is low or the grid cannot get the electricity where it can be used. Remarkably, it turns out that these credits can be traded between the energy companies and the landowner obviously wanted his cut of what's produced on his land, despite it being non-existent. Is there a playwright out there who can give us the Cheviot, the Stag and the imaginary electricity for 2025? The lessons from the original play have obviously not yet cut through. R. Miller, Darvel. Now that I am no longer a member of the SNP, and my once treasured badge of honour, my plastic membership card, has been cut up and awaits recycling, I can't help but think that it's perhaps ironic that it took Marie Black to spur me into doing something I should have done a long time earlier. It will not matter to the SNP that another member has left because they don't listen to us anyway. That is a sad indication of the state of play for all of us independent supporters. At least I got a good laugh when two plonkers had a chat on Monday. As the President of the Free World ranted that he didn't like all sorts of people and other stuff, including windmills and the Labour Mayor of London, perhaps the Prime Minister should have told the President that windmills were very, very important because they sent power to England from Scotland down south so that the poor Scots could be charged exorbitant prices to buy it back. He could also have told the President, who said that he wanted Scotland to thrive, that he, the UK Prime Minister, would never allow that to happen, as England would be screwed if Scotland were to become independent. It is nauseating to say the least watching people letting themselves be humiliated by a convicted felon posing as some sort of messiah. I might not be a member of the SNP anymore, but I am still a proud Scot. As such, I have to say that I think we are better than all this. Old John Ayrshire. And that was letters from the readers of The National.
That concludes this week's edition of The National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Pure Review and to tell your friends about our service.